smoke below the guardrail. The blizzard had turned the mountain pass into a white tomb, and any sane rider would have been off the road hours ago. But the Ironhaven Guardians were still out, crawling along Highway 9 at 15 miles an hour, headlights cutting through the blinding snow. They were looking for stranded motorists. What they found instead was a thin column of smoke rising from a ravine just beyond a broken stretch of guardrail. A battered RV lay on its side, half buried in a drift, its engine still hissing, its windows shattered. Inside, a family of four: a father with a shattered leg, a mother barely conscious, and two small children huddled in a nest of blankets, had been trapped for 12 hours, waiting for a miracle that was slowly freezing over. And the bikers who rappelled down that icy slope didn't just pull them from the wreckage. They uncovered a story of desperate flight, an entire life packed into a failing vehicle, and a family who had been told by the world that they didn't matter. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or town in the comments below. We want to see how far the Hidden Heroes family reaches. Subscribe to Hidden Heroes, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story about real-life angels on two wheels. The storm had no name, but it would be remembered in the valley for a generation. It swept down from the Canadian Rockies in the last week of January, a white fury that closed highways, collapsed roofs, and buried cars under drifts so deep only the radio antennas showed. The mountain pass on Highway 9 was the first to be shut down, the gates swinging closed at noon. But by then, a small motorcycle club had already decided they weren't going to wait for the plows. The Ironhaven Guardians were not a search and rescue unit. They were a brotherhood and sisterhood of riders who had dedicated their off-road months to patrolling the backcountry for anyone the storm might have caught. Their president was a man named Cade Harrow, 49 years old, with a face like chiseled granite, a thick silver beard, and eyes the color of a winter sky just before dawn. He'd been a wilderness guide in Alaska before he moved south, and he knew snow the way sailors know tides. His leather cut was a heavy canvas of his life's work. The top rocker read Ironhaven Guardians, the bottom rocker We Ride the Storm, and the central emblem was a great iron lantern with a flame burning inside a snowflake. Around it clustered patches: a medic cross, a child's handprint in a mitten, a mountain rescue pin, a road captain's bar, and a patch that read "No one freezes alone." His vice president was a woman named Anya Frost. She was 44, lean and sharp-faced, with close-cropped white hair and a prosthetic foot she'd lost to frostbite years ago on a winter climb. She had a photographic memory for terrain and a calm that could steady any crisis. The medic was a young man named Corbin Vale, 29, who had been a paramedic on a helicopter crew before a crash had taken his nerve but not his skill. The mechanic was a giant named Tarn, with a red beard and hands that could fix anything with an engine, but who had also trained in winter survival. And the prospect was a 19-year-old named Jace, a former foster kid with a quiet intensity, who had only been with the Guardians for 6 months but had already proven himself in a dozen tough situations. They had been riding for 3 hours in near whiteout conditions, their bikes equipped with studded tires and chains, when Jace's headlight caught something wrong. The guardrail on the outer curve of the pass was torn away, the metal twisted outward as if something heavy had plowed through it. He signaled, and the group pulled over, their engines rumbling against the wind. Cade dismounted and walked to the edge, his boots sinking knee-deep in fresh powder. He shielded his eyes and peered down the steep slope. At first he saw nothing but swirling snow and the dark shapes of trees. Then a gust of wind cleared the air for a split second, and he saw it, a thin, gray wisp of smoke rising from a shape half buried 50 feet below. "Anya, Tarn, get the ropes and the medical kits. We've got a vehicle down there, and it's still smoking. Someone might be alive." They worked with the speed of a pit crew. Tarn anchored a rope to his motorcycle's frame, and Cade, Anya, and Corbin rappelled down the slope, their crampons biting into the ice. The RV was a crumpled mess, an old Class C model with faded stripes, lying on its passenger side, its roof crushed against a pine trunk. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks, but a small fire had been lit in the snow nearby, a ring of stones with a few dying branches. Someone was trying to stay warm. Cade reached the broken side door first. He banged his fist against the metal. "Hello? Is anyone in there? We're here to help." A muffled voice answered, weak and hoarse. "In here. My leg's broken. My wife, she's hurt." The kids are in the back. Please, we've been here since last night. Cade and Anya pried the door open, their gloves slipping on the frozen metal. Inside, the RV was a chaos of overturned furniture, shattered dishes, and scattered belongings. A man in his mid-30s lay pinned by a collapsed cabinet, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle, his face gray with pain and cold. His name was Darian Vale. Beside him, half-conscious and wrapped in a sleeping bag, was his wife, Marin, a deep gash on her forehead crusted with frozen blood. And in the back, huddled in a nest of blankets and pillows, were two small children, a boy of about 7 and a girl of about 4, whose names were Toby and Willa. They were shivering but awake, their eyes wide with terror. Corbin went to work immediately. He stabilized Darian's leg with a splint from his kit, checked Marin's head wound, and found it superficial but worrying, and then turned to the children, speaking to them in the calm, gentle voice of someone who had talked down 100 panicked patients. Hey, little ones. I'm Corbin. I'm a medic. Can you tell me if anything hurts? Toby shook his head, his teeth chattering. I'm just cold. Willa's cold too. Mommy told us to stay under the blankets. You did exactly the right thing. We're going to get you out of here. What's your favorite animal? Toby blinked. A bear. I'm built like one, so you're in luck. We'll be up the hill before you know it. He turned to Anya, his voice dropping. I need to get the kids up first, before their core temperature drops any further. Tarn can lower a rescue sled. The father's leg is bad, possible compound fracture. He's been losing blood. The mother might have a concussion. We're looking at maybe an hour before the storm kicks up again. Anya relayed the information into her radio. Tarn and Jace, still on the highway, began lowering a rescue sled and additional blankets. While they worked, Cade knelt beside Darian, whose breath was coming in shallow gasps. Sir, we're going to have you out of here soon. Can you tell me how you ended up down here? Darian closed his eyes. We were driving through the night. Lost our house in a fire 3 weeks ago. Everything. We were heading to my brother's place in Kelowna. He said he'd take us in. But the storm hit, and the RV's tires slipped on the ice. I lost control. We went through the guardrail. I tried to keep everyone warm. I thought nobody would find us. Cade's jaw tightened. You kept a fire going in a blizzard with a broken leg. You're a tough man, Darian. Your family's lucky to have you. Darian's eyes glistened. My kids, are they okay? Your kids are about to be wrapped in warm blankets and carried up a hill by a very large, very gentle biker named Tarn. They're going to be fine. The rescue took nearly an hour, and the storm clawed at them every moment. Tarn rappelled down and, with Cade's help, gently lifted first Willa, then Toby, into the rescue sled. The children were strapped in, cocooned in blankets, and hauled up the slope by Jace, who was waiting at the top with a thermos of hot chocolate and a prayer that the cable would hold. Corbin remained in the RV with Marin, keeping her neck stable, while Anya and Cade carefully extracted Darian from the wreckage. The broken leg was agonizing, but Darian bit down on a leather glove and didn't scream. He didn't want to frighten his children. By the time the last person was lifted to the highway, the storm had begun to rage again, the wind whipping snow into blinding curtains. The Ironhaven Guardians clubhouse was only 20 miles away, but in these conditions, it might as well have been 100. Cade made a decision. We're not going to make it to the clubhouse in this. Tarn, you know the old ranger station on Bear Creek Road. Is it still standing? Tarn nodded. Roof sound. No power, but there's a fireplace and some old bunks. It's about 4 miles from here. That's our destination. We'll get the family warm, stabilize the leg, and ride out the worst of it. Jace, take point. Anya, you ride with the mother. Corbin, you've got the father. I'll take the kids. We move slow and steady. The 4-mile ride to the ranger station was the most harrowing of their lives, but the Guardians were trained for this. The children were bundled into a sidecar, pressed against Cade's broad back under a heavy tarp. Marin rode with Anya, her arms wrapped weakly around the vice president's waist. Darian was transported on a makeshift sled towed slowly behind Tarn's bike, with Corbin riding beside him to monitor his vitals. They arrived at the station just as the storm reached its screaming peak, the wind howling like a wounded animal through the pines. The ranger station was a sturdy log cabin with a stone fireplace, a stack of dry wood, and a few dusty bunks. The Guardians had used it before as a winter waypoint. Within minutes, Tarn had a fire blazing, and the cabin began to warm. Corbin and Anya set up a medical corner where they cleaned Marin's wound, stitched it closed, and wrapped her in warm blankets. They gave Darian a painkiller from the med kit and splinted his leg more securely. Jace heated soup on a small camp stove, and Toby and Willa ate their first hot meal in over a day, their faces slowly regaining color. While the family rested, Cade sat with Darian near the fire. The man's pain had eased with the medication, and he was finally able to speak without gasping. He told Cade the full story. The fire that had taken their home had started in the middle of the night, an electrical fault in an old wall. They had escaped with nothing but the clothes on their backs. The RV had been a gift from a neighbor, an old vehicle that barely ran, but it was all they had. They'd packed what little they could salvage and set out for Kelowna, where Darian's brother had promised them a basement apartment and a fresh start. But the brother's situation had changed. His landlord wouldn't allow extra occupants, and Darian had been too proud to tell the club, too ashamed to ask for more help. So they'd been drifting, trying to find somewhere else, when the storm and the curve had conspired to destroy them. "We had nothing left," Darian whispered. "And then we crashed. I thought that was it. I thought my family was going to die in that ravine because I couldn't provide for them." Cade leaned forward, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "You survived a house fire, kept your family together, and kept them warm in a snowstorm with a broken leg. That's not failure. That's the definition of a provider. Now let us provide for you for a while." The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world of blinding white and deep silence. A rescue helicopter, called in by the Guardians' radio contact, airlifted Darian and Marin to the regional hospital. The children, who had bonded with Jace over stories of snow bears and motorcycles, were cared for at the clubhouse by the Guardians' extended network of volunteers. Darian's leg required surgery, and he would need weeks of physical therapy, but the doctors said he would walk again. Marin's concussion healed, and her stitches were removed after 10 days. But the Ironhaven Guardians didn't stop at medical care. They learned that the Valas had lost everything, not just their home, but their sense of stability, their community, their hope. The club, which had a large farmhouse property with several outbuildings, offered them the use of a vacant cottage on the land. It was small but warm, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a view of the mountains. They could stay as long as they needed, rent-free, while Darian recovered and they got back on their feet. The veiled children, Toby and Willa, became the darlings of the clubhouse. Tarn taught Toby how to whittle small wooden animals, and Jace built a tiny snow sled for Willa. Anya, who had lost her own family years ago, spent hours with Marin, helping her navigate the paperwork for disaster assistance, enrolling the kids in the local school, and just sitting with her over cups of tea while she processed the trauma. Corbin continued to provide medical follow-up, ensuring Darian's leg healed properly. Cade himself became something of a mentor to Darian. He recognized the shame that clung to the man, the feeling of having failed as a provider, and he worked gently to dismantle it. He shared his own story of a time when he had lost everything in a business collapse and had been homeless for 6 months before the Guardians had found him. "The world tells men we're supposed to stand alone," Cade said one evening, as they sat on the porch of the cottage watching the sunset paint the snow gold. "But the truth is, we need each other. That's why we ride. That's why we stop for smoke on the highway. You're not weak for needing help. You're human." By spring, Darian was walking with a cane, and Marin had found a job at a local bookstore. The Valas had saved enough to begin paying a modest rent, though the Guardians insisted on keeping it low. The children were thriving in their new school, and Toby had declared that he wanted to be a biker when he grew up. Jace had already promised to teach him to ride a balance bike as soon as the snow melted. At the Ironhaven Guardians' annual Storm Rider Rally, a charity event that raised funds for families displaced by disaster, Darian Vale stood on a small stage with his family beside him. He spoke into a microphone, his voice thick with emotion. "3 months ago, my family was trapped in a wrecked RV at the bottom of a ravine during the worst blizzard in years. I had a broken leg, my wife was bleeding, and my children were freezing. I thought we were going to die. But a group of bikers saw a wisp of smoke and decided to stop. They didn't just pull us out of the wreckage. They pulled us into their family. They gave us a home, medical care, jobs, and a future. I used to think bikers were people to be afraid of. Now I know they're the ones who carry lanterns into the storm. The Ironhaven Guardians saved our lives. And they taught me that hope isn't a feeling. It's a choice. It's the choice to ride out when everyone else stays home, to look for smoke when everyone else looks away, and to believe that no one is ever too broken to be saved. The crowd, hundreds of riders from allied clubs, erupted in cheers and roaring engines. Cade stood at the edge of the stage, his leather cut gleaming with patches, and he smiled. As the rally wound down and the stars came out, Toby and Willow ran through the crowd, their laughter ringing like bells. Jace chased them, his prospect cut flapping. Tarn was at the grill, flipping burgers. Anya and Corbin danced to a song on the radio. And Darian, his arm around Marin, watched the fire crackle in the big stone hearth that had become the symbol of their new life. The smoke that rose from a ravine had been the signal. The bikers who saw it had been the answer. And the family that had been buried in snow was now rooted in the warmest soil imaginable. A family of leather and steel and unwavering love.